My granddaughter sent me a text at 6:47 on a Thursday morning. I was still in my robe, drinking my first cup of coffee, watching the sun come up over the ridge behind my house. The message was 3 sentences long, and by the time I finished reading it, my hand was shaking so hard I nearly dropped the mug. "Grandpa, don't come to Sunday dinner. Something is wrong with Dad. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Please don't tell Renee." I read it 4 times. Then I set the mug down very carefully on the counter, went to the window, and stood there for a long time watching the light move across the Tennessee hills, trying to decide if I was overreacting or if I was finally seeing clearly what I'd been too stubborn to admit for months. My name is George. I'm 68 years old, retired after 31 years, running a small but decent contracting business out of Knoxville. I've got a 4-bedroom house I built mostly with my own hands back in 1994, a wood shop in the garage where I spend my mornings, and a life that has been, until recently, quiet in the way that only becomes possible after surviving enough hard things. My wife Ruth passed away 2 years ago from a stroke. She was 64. It happened fast. Tuesday she was complaining about a headache. Thursday she was gone. There are no words for that kind of loss, so I won't try. What I'll say is that Ruth was the center of everything. She was the one who remembered birthdays and organized holidays and kept track of which neighbor needed a meal and which friend needed a phone call. When she died, the house went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with sound. Our son Nathan took it as hard as I did, maybe harder. He was 41 when his mother died. He'd had a difficult decade already. His first marriage had ended when Sadie was 6, a slow collapse that left him hollowed out for years. He threw himself into work and did well. He manages logistics for a regional distribution company. Good salary, good people, but long hours and a lot of time alone. After Ruth died, I worried about him. He'd call me on Sunday evenings, and I could hear the emptiness on the other end of the line. Not sadness exactly, just the sound of a man rattling around in his own life. About 14 months ago, Nathan met Renee at a work conference in Atlanta. She was 37, worked in corporate event planning, and by every account Nathan gave me, she was smart, funny, and completely devoted to him from the first conversation. They dated long distance for 2 months before she relocated to Knoxville. 5 months after that, they were engaged. I'll be honest, I was uneasy from the beginning, and I'm not proud of that. I told myself I was being a suspicious old man, that Nathan deserved happiness, that Ruth would have wanted this for him. Renee was polite to me, brought things when she came to the house, complimented my woodwork, laughed at my jokes. She did everything right. But something sat wrong. I couldn't name it then. Maybe it was how quickly it all moved. Maybe it was the way she'd changed the subject whenever Nathan's finances came up, that almost imperceptible brightening in her expression, followed by a studied neutrality. Maybe it was how she spoke about Sadie always warmly, always a little too warmly, the way you speak about a child when you've been coached to seem like you love her but haven't gotten there yet. Sadie is 15 now. She's Nathan's daughter from his first marriage, and she splits time between her mother's place in Chattanooga and Nathan's apartment in West Knoxville. She's a quiet kid, serious, reads constantly, wants to study environmental science. She's the kind of teenager who notices things adults have learned to overlook. When Renee moved in with Nathan, Sadie stopped talking about her weekend visits. When I asked how things were going at Dad's, she'd give me one-word answers. Fine. Okay. Normal. She'd look out the window when she said it. I noticed. I didn't push. I thought it was adjustment. That normal teenage friction that happens when a parent brings someone new into the home. I was wrong to let it go. About 6 months ago, Nathan started seeming off. Tired in a way that sleep didn't explain. He'd lost weight, not dramatically, but enough that his face looked different, more angular, like the padding had been slowly taken away. He complained of headaches. His hands trembled sometimes when he reached for things, small, fine tremors that came and went. When I asked him about it, he said he'd been under pressure at work, that the company was restructuring, that he wasn't sleeping well. Made sense on the surface. I filed it away and kept watching. The trembling got worse. Then at Thanksgiving he knocked over his water glass and couldn't seem to understand for a few seconds why his hand had done that. He laughed it off. Renee put her arm around him and said he'd been overdoing it. I watched her say it. There was something in her face that I couldn't quite read, not quite concern, not quite satisfaction. Something in between. That was the moment I should have acted. I didn't. I'm telling you this because the worst part of what comes next isn't what Renee did. It's the weeks I spent talking myself out of my own instincts. Then came my granddaughter's text, on that Thursday morning. I was at Riverside Park by 11:45. I sat on a bench near the walking trail with a cup of coffee I'd brought in a thermos and waited. Sadie came at noon exactly. On her bicycle, her backpack slung over one shoulder, she locked the bike to the rack, sat down next to me, and didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Just looked at the river. Then she said, "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for 2 months." I didn't rush her, just waited. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph she'd taken. It was a picture of a bottle of pills. The label said they were a brand-name supplement magnesium, the kind you buy at any pharmacy. But the bottle was open and the contents were visible, and they didn't look like magnesium capsules. They were different, smaller, a different color. Someone had refilled a supplement bottle with something else. "I found this in the kitchen cabinet," Sadie said, "behind the other vitamins." Renee's side of the cabinet. "Dad doesn't keep anything over there. I wouldn't have noticed except I needed the Advil and I moved some things around and this fell out. Did you look up what was inside?" I took one and I looked at the markings. She pulled up another photo, a screenshot of a pharmacy identification website. The pill matched a prescription-strength blood thinner, the kind that, taken carefully under doctor supervision, helps prevent clots. The kind that, taken incorrectly or given to someone without their knowledge, could cause internal bleeding, could cause exactly the kind of fatigue and confusion Nathan had been showing, could, in the wrong dose over time, cause much worse. I sat very still for a moment. "There's more," Sadie said. She told me she'd started paying attention after finding the bottle, watching Renee in the kitchen. Renee always made Nathan his morning vitamins, handed them to him with his orange juice, one of those small domestic gestures that looks like love. Sadie had watched from the hallway one morning and seen Renee open a different bottle, not the one that lived on the counter, a different one. She took from her purse and pressed 2 pills out into her palm before adding them to Nathan's little vitamin cup. She looked around before she did it, Sadie said, like she was checking that nobody was watching. She didn't see me. I asked her how long ago that was. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. My 15-year-old granddaughter had been carrying this alone for 6 weeks, trying to figure out if she was imagining things, trying to work out what to do, terrified that if she was wrong, she would blow up her father's relationship, and terrified that if she was right and said nothing, she would lose her father entirely. "You did the right thing telling me," I said. She shook her head hard. "I should have told you sooner. He fell last week, Grandpa, in the bathroom. He said he was dizzy. He went to his regular doctor, and they said his iron was low. They gave him iron supplements." She looked at the river. Renee filled the prescription. The iron supplements were probably fine. What I was thinking about was all the other supplements, the ones Renee controlled. I asked Sadie if there was anything else. She hesitated. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She'd printed it. I found this in the printer queue. Renee must have forgotten it was there. I printed my homework, and this came out first. It was a partial document. A letter, it looked like, addressed to an attorney. The letter referenced an estate and used Nathan's full name and mentioned the revision of a beneficiary designation on a life insurance policy. The return address on the letterhead was an attorney's office I didn't recognize, in a town 2 hours from Knoxville. Not Nathan's attorney, not anyone Nathan had ever mentioned to me. I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket. I told Sadie I loved her and that she had done something extraordinarily brave. I told her not to go back to Nathan's apartment for the rest of the weekend. She had a school friend she could stay with. I told her to tell her mother she wasn't feeling well, keep it vague, and to not say a word to Renee. She looked at me with those serious gray eyes. "Is Dad going to be okay?" I told her yes. I said it with complete conviction because the alternative was not something I was willing to consider. I drove home and I sat in my kitchen and I thought for 3 hours. The medical piece was the most urgent. If Renee had been slipping Nathan high-dose blood thinners without his knowledge, he was in real danger. The fatigue, the trembling, the dizziness, the fall, these were consistent with that kind of slow, systematic poisoning, not dramatic. Designed to look like stress, like aging, like a man working too hard. Eventually it would look like a heart problem or a stroke. The kind of thing that wouldn't surprise anyone given how visibly run down he'd been. Then the financial piece. The attorney letter about a beneficiary designation. Nathan had a significant life insurance policy. He also had a stake in a business partnership he'd invested in 8 years ago that had grown substantially. He had retirement accounts. He'd been careful with money his whole adult life, a habit he got from Ruth, who had grown up with very little and never forgot it. There was real money there, and there was me, my house, my retirement. What I'd built and saved and intended to leave to Nathan and through him to Sadie. I thought about that letter. The attorney 2 hours away. The quiet revision of documents using someone else's office so there would be no familiar face, no one who might mention it to Nathan casually over coffee. I picked up my phone and called an old friend named Dennis. We'd known each other since we were both in our 20s working construction in Maryville, and Dennis had spent the last 25 years of his career as an investigator for the Knox County DA's office before retiring 4 years ago. He still played poker with half the people he used to work with. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is something Dennis has always been good at. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "George, I have to tell you, what you're describing, if it's what you think it is, it's serious enough that you cannot go to Nathan directly. Not yet. She may be watching for exactly that reaction. If he confronts her, she'll destroy evidence and disappear before anyone can do anything. I know. You need more than a photograph of a pill bottle and a partial letter from a printer. I believe you. But a judge needs more than that. So what do I do?" He outlined it. It was methodical. It was going to require me to spend time in that apartment under the same roof as a woman I now believed was trying to kill my son. It was going to require me to be calm and warm and completely unreadable. "Can you do that?" Dennis asked. "She took the best years of Ruth's life," I said. "Renee's not getting Nathan." The next morning I called Nathan. I told him I hadn't been feeling right lately, that the house felt too big, that I missed seeing him. I asked if I could come stay for a little while. Just a week, maybe 2. Keep him company while he wasn't feeling well. I laid it on gently but steadily, the way you do when you know the answer might be complicated. There was a pause. Then he said, "Dad, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to." Another pause. I heard him set something down. "Let me check with Renee." He came back in 2 minutes. She was apparently thrilled. Happy to have me. Plenty of room. She'd make up the guest room. I packed a bag. At the bottom, under my clothes, I put 3 items Dennis had lent me. 2 small wireless cameras, no bigger than a thumb drive, and a voice-activated digital recorder. He'd also given me specific instructions on placement and on the monitoring software I could access from my phone. When I arrived at the apartment that afternoon, Nathan answered the door, and I was not prepared for how he looked up close. The last time I'd seen him was 3 weeks earlier at a brief lunch, and I'd managed to rationalize away what I saw. Standing in the doorway now, in the overhead light of his own entryway, he looked like a man who had been steadily drained of something. The color was wrong. His eyes moved slowly. He hugged me, and I could feel the slight tremor in his arms. Renee appeared behind him, all welcome and warmth, kissing me on the cheek, saying how good it was to see me, how Nathan had been hoping for more family time. She was a good-looking woman, put together, and she had a particular quality that I now understood and had been slow to name. She was always performing just one beat ahead of the moment, always saying the thing that would make sense after the fact. It's a quality you see sometimes in people who have been lying for a long time. They've gotten so efficient at it they don't even pause anymore. That evening, she cooked dinner. I watched the kitchen carefully. Nathan's food came from the same pots as mine, which I'd half expected she was too smart to risk 2 people getting sick at the same time. The vitamins happened before dinner. A small cup produced matter-of-factly orange juice on the side, Nathan taking them without looking. A completely habitual gesture. I counted the pills in his cup. 5. I'd need to know exactly what was in there. After dinner, Nathan went to lie down. He'd been tired since mid-afternoon. Renee suggested we sit and have tea. Just the two of us, getting to know each other better, she said, though we'd technically known each other for over a year. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, and I was an actor. I have never worked harder at anything in my life. She asked about my house. How many bedrooms? What was the property worth these days? Had I thought about whether it was too much space for one person? She asked it in a soft, concerned way, all dressed up as caring about my well-being. But underneath was the actual question. She wanted to know what I had. I told her I'd updated my will last year, that everything went to Nathan, and if Nathan predeceased me, everything went to Sadie directly. I watched her process that. The smile stayed fixed, but something moved behind her eyes. That night, after the apartment went quiet, and I could hear Nathan's uneven breathing through the wall, I lay in the guest room with my phone and watched the camera feeds. At 12:23 inches the morning, the kitchen light came on. She moved through the kitchen with the ease of someone completely comfortable in their own space. She went to the pantry first, reached behind a row of canned goods, and retrieved a small brown bottle with no label. She opened the vitamin container, Nathan's container, the one she kept separate from the general supply, and carefully counted out pills. She added 2 from the brown bottle. She returned the brown bottle to its spot behind the canned goods. Then she stood at the counter for a moment, like she was reviewing a mental checklist. She poured a glass of water, drank it, put the glass in the sink, and went back to bed. I had it on video. Clear, well-lit, unambiguous. The retrieval of an unmarked bottle. The addition of unknown pills to my son's vitamin supply. I texted Dennis at 12:31. I have something. Moving tomorrow. The next morning I was up at 5. I went to the kitchen and I took a single photograph of the pantry with the canned goods visible, the brown bottle just barely distinguishable behind them. Then I set up Nathan's coffee, moving around the kitchen quietly. And when Renee came out at 6:30 and found me already sitting at the table with the newspaper, I smiled and said, "Good morning." "You're an early riser," she said. "Old habit." I made coffee. Nathan's vitamins are on the counter. I set them out for him. Her hand moved toward the vitamin cup before she caught herself. She looked at it. I had already refilled it from the general supply. Nathan's regular vitamins, no additions. I'd put the cup exactly where she would have placed it. "I thought I'd save you the trouble," I said pleasantly. "Thank you." Her voice was perfectly neutral. "That's thoughtful." Nathan came out at 7. Renee handed him his vitamins and watched him take them. I watched her, watch him. He drank his coffee, ate a few bites of toast, said he felt a little better, actually, a little less foggy this morning, like maybe he'd finally gotten some decent sleep. She excused herself to make a phone call, went to the bedroom and closed the door. At 9:15, Dennis arrived with 2 detectives from the Knoxville Police Department and a warrant. The knock on the door was solid and official. Renee answered it, and I heard her voice go immediately high and sharp. "Detectives," she kept saying, "what is this about? There must be some kind of mistake." I walked into the entryway and stood next to Nathan, who was gripping the doorframe, looking like he was trying very hard to understand what he was seeing. "Renee," I said, "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at me, and for just a moment, before the composure came back, I saw her face without the performance on it. She knew. "I've been recording the kitchen," I said, "since I got here." The detectives found the brown bottle behind the canned goods exactly where I'd seen her retrieve it. They took it as evidence. They found a second supply in her car, in a zippered pocket inside her gym bag, a prescription medication, not prescribed to Nathan, not prescribed to anyone named in the apartment. They found a file on her laptop that contained scanned copies of insurance documents with Nathan's name and what appeared to be altered beneficiary information. They found a burner phone, prepaid, with a contact saved under the name of her sister, who, it turned out, was not her sister, a man who had a prior conviction for fraud in North Carolina. And in her phone, in a notes application she'd password protected but which the forensics team accessed within the day, they found a list: properties, accounts, estimated values, Nathan's retirement accounts, Nathan's business partnership stake, my house, my life insurance, organized, annotated, totaled at the bottom. She'd done the math on all of us. Nathan was at the hospital within the hour. The doctors ran a full panel. What they found was a picture of someone who had been receiving a slow, consistent dose of a medication that disrupts the body's ability to regulate bleeding, combined with a sedative compound that affects cognitive clarity and coordination. Not enough to kill quickly. Enough to make a reasonably healthy man look like he was declining from stress, from grief, from the accumulated weight of a hard few years. Enough to make a cardiac event look plausible, even inevitable. The emergency physician said to me quietly, in the hallway, that if this had continued for another 2 or 3 months, without intervention, they would have been treating a very different kind of emergency. Nathan was admitted for 4 days. I stayed at the hospital most of that time. Sadie came with her mother and sat next to her father's bed and held his hand and didn't cry until she thought no one was looking. I saw her. I walked over and put my hand on her shoulder, and she leaned against me and let herself fall apart for a few minutes. And then she straightened up and went back to holding her father's hand, because that's the kind of person she is. When Nathan was well enough to really talk, he lay in the hospital bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. He didn't say anything about Renee at first. He talked about his mother, about Ruth, about how much he'd wanted not to be alone anymore. He said he thought he'd finally found someone who understood what it felt like to be lonely for a long time and then not be. He said he'd been so grateful for that. I sat in the chair next to his bed, and I listened. Eventually he turned his head and looked at me and said, "How long did you know?" I was honest with him. I told him I'd had doubts for months, that I'd ignored them because I wanted to be wrong. I told him that wasn't something I was proud of, and that I was sorry it took my granddaughter to make me act. He closed his eyes. Sadie figured it out. "Sadie saved your life," I said. "Same as she saved mine." He was quiet for a moment. Then, very softly, "I want to talk to her." I went to get her from the waiting room. What Sadie said to her father that afternoon is theirs. I stood outside the room and gave them privacy. But when I looked through the small window in the door, I could see them talking, and after a while I could see Nathan crying. Really crying, and Sadie, with her arms around him, this 15-year-old girl holding her father together, and I had to walk to the end of the hallway and stand by the window for a few minutes to get myself composed. The investigation expanded quickly once they started pulling on threads. The man from the burner phone, Renee's so-called contact, had a history with her that predated Nathan by years. They'd worked together on at least one previous scheme involving an elderly widower in Georgia who had been found dead of what was originally ruled a cardiac event 8 months before Renee ever appeared in Nathan's life. That case was reopened. The body was exhumed. I don't need to tell you what they found. The forensic accountant, the DA's office, brought in trace documents showing that Renee had been in the process of setting up a shell structure that would have made it extremely difficult to untangle Nathan's assets from hers in the event of his death. The attorney 2 hours away, the one on the letterhead Sadie had found in the printer, had been engaged to file paperwork that would have superseded Nathan's existing estate plan. When investigators visited that office, they found a complete file with Nathan's forged signature on 3 separate documents. Her contact was arrested in North Carolina on the same day Renee was taken into custody in Knoxville. He negotiated a plea relatively quickly, which was how the Georgia case came fully to light. How many people Renee had touched before she found Nathan, and before she set her sights on me, I don't know if I'll ever have a complete number. Some losses may never be attributed. Some families may never know. That thought stays with me. It keeps me up sometimes at night. The weight of it, the idea of other men like Nathan who didn't have a Sadie watching from the hallway. The trial was 11 months later. I sat through most of it. The evidence was thorough and damning. The video footage from the kitchen camera, the medical analysis of what Nathan had been given and for how long, the forged documents, the financial shell structure, the connection to the Georgia death, the burner phone records. Renee's attorney argued that the medical situation was a misunderstanding, that Renee had only been trying to help Nathan with supplements she believed would support his health, that the financial documents had been misrepresented to her by her contact. The jury took 19 hours. They came back with guilty on all counts: attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, and a related count connected to the Georgia case. Her contact was convicted separately. The judge, a woman who had been on the bench for 16 years and had the kind of face that reveals nothing, called the deliberate, sustained nature of what Renee had done among the most troubling she had encountered. She sentenced Renee to 30 years. The contact received 22. I watched Renee's face when the verdict was read. She didn't break. I'll give her that. She kept the composure that had served her so well for so long. But when the handcuffs went on, she looked across the courtroom, not at her attorney, not at the judge. She looked at me. I don't know what she expected to see. I looked back at her steadily. I felt no satisfaction. I felt nothing much at all. Just the slow settling of something that had been held at terrible tension for a very long time. Nathan sold the apartment. He said he couldn't walk into that kitchen without seeing things he didn't want to see. He found a house in North Knox, closer to me. We're about 12 minutes apart now, which is a distance I can cross in the time it takes my coffee to cool. He took several months away from work, went to therapy weekly, came to my place on Tuesday and Thursday evenings for dinner. He didn't talk about Renee much. When he did, he didn't talk about her with anger. He talked about her with a kind of bewildered grief, the way you feel when you realize you've been holding something you thought was real and discover there was nothing there at all. Sadie is staying mostly in Knoxville now. She decided she wanted to be close to her father through his recovery, and her mother supported that. She set up in Nathan's new house, painted her room a dark green she'd been wanting for years, put her books on shelves she and Nathan built together on a Saturday in early spring. She started volunteering with a local environmental group. She's still serious, still quiet, still reads too much according to most people and exactly enough according to me. She talks about what happened more openly than Nathan does. She says she thinks it's important to understand it, to not pretend it didn't happen just because the outcome was okay. She's right. That's what I told her, and I meant it. There are things I understand now that I wish I'd understood sooner. About the way predators move. About the specific mechanics of how someone gets close enough to cause harm. What I saw in Renee, looking back with the clearer eyes of afterward, was a person who understood exactly how to use other people's hope against them. Nathan was lonely, and she saw it. I was grieving, and she saw it. We both wanted to believe that something good had appeared at a difficult time, because that is a deeply human thing to want. She counted on that. She dressed herself in exactly the shape of what each of us needed and walked through the door we left open. I've thought about the signs, the speed not just of the relationship but of the financial entanglement, the subtle questions about money and property and what Nathan had and what I had, always framed as concern, always just one step removed from the actual question. The way she positioned herself between Nathan and his old friends, not dramatically, not in a way you'd notice unless you were looking, but consistently. Fewer dinners with people he'd known for 20 years. Fewer phone calls returned. A gradual narrowing of his world until it was mostly just her. The attention to his medical situation, the managing of doctor visits, the insistence on being present for conversations with physicians, the framing of his symptoms as stress so that nothing would be investigated too carefully. And the children. She was always too correct with Sadie. Too careful. Children are extraordinary at detecting performance. Sadie felt it before she could name it, and she kept watching long after the adults around her had settled into comfort. Pay attention to children. That is not a small thing. Kids haven't yet learned to subordinate what they perceive to what they're supposed to believe. They call things by what they look like. Sadie knew something was wrong with her father's vitamins, because she looked at them carefully. She knew something was wrong with the woman who handed them over, because she watched the handover. She sat with that knowledge alone for 6 weeks because she was 15 years old, and the thing she was seeing was enormous, and she wasn't sure anyone would believe her, and she was afraid of what would happen if she was wrong. I want to say this clearly. For anyone who might be watching this who has children or grandchildren in their lives, if a child tries to tell you something is wrong, you listen, even if it sounds impossible, even if it complicates everything. Especially then. Sadie didn't come to me with a complete case. She came to me with a photograph of a pill bottle and a piece of paper from a printer, and a whispered, "Something's wrong with Dad." That was enough. That was everything. The other thing I'll say is about instinct. I had doubts about Renee from early on. Not certainty, just that low-frequency unease that has no particular logic to it, the kind that comes from years of paying attention to people. I talked myself out of it, repeatedly, because I wanted to be wrong, because I liked the idea of Nathan being happy, because Renee was doing everything right on the surface, and I didn't want to be the suspicious old man who couldn't accept change. That cost months. It might have cost more. I'm not saying trust no one. I'm saying take your instincts seriously enough to investigate. There's a difference between paranoia and attention. I wasn't paranoid about Renee. I was right about her, and I looked away because it was easier. Don't look away. These days, Nathan and Sadie and I have dinner together on Sunday evenings. Nathan cooks, which is something he didn't do much of before it's become a new thing for him, a way of spending time that is entirely his own, food that comes from his own hands. He's getting good at it. Last week, he made a chicken and white bean stew from a recipe our neighbor gave him, and he was unreasonably proud of it, and it deserved every compliment it received. Sadie does her homework at my kitchen table on Thursday afternoons, before Nathan picks her up for dinner. She asks me questions about the house, about how I built it, about the joinery and the woodwork. She started learning basic carpentry. She's got good hands and better patience, and Ruth would have adored her for it. I'm 68 years old. Some people my age would say they're too old to have done what I did, the late nights watching camera feeds, the performance across the dinner table, the coordination with investigators, the steady management of fear while making everything look ordinary. I would say age has nothing to do with ability, and everything to do with what you're protecting. I've had 68 years to accumulate the things that matter. I know what they are now in a way I didn't when I was 30. I'm not letting go of them without a fight. Ruth would tell me I took too many risks. She'd be right. She'd also understand exactly why. She knew, probably better than I did, what it meant to have one child, and to know that child's life had value beyond measurement. She knew what it meant to have a granddaughter like Sadie. She used to say that the family you build is the one real thing, that everything else is peripheral. She was right about that. She was right about most things. On the evening the verdict came in, Sadie called me from school. She'd gotten word from her mother. She said very simply, "It's done." And then she said, "Do you think Grandma knows?" I thought about that for a moment. About Ruth, who had been gone for 2 years by then, who had never met Renee, who had never seen what nearly happened to the family she spent her life building. I told Sadie I thought her grandmother knew everything she needed to know. That somewhere, somehow, Ruth was aware that Nathan was safe, that Sadie was fierce and brilliant and whole, and that the things she'd spent her life constructing hadn't been taken apart by someone who saw it only as inventory. Sadie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good. Just that. Good." There are mornings now when I sit in my woodshop before sunrise, and I let myself think about how differently everything might have gone. If Sadie had waited one more week to text me, if I'd been slower to call Dennis, if the camera placement had been slightly off, or the warrant had been delayed, or Nathan had drunk his vitamins that last morning before I'd swapped them. Any one of those things, and this is a different story. Not one I'm able to fully think through, so I don't stay there long. I get up. I make something with my hands. I drive the 12 minutes to Nathan's house, or I wait for Sadie's Thursday afternoon visit, or I call someone I care about and I tell them, in whatever plain, ordinary words I can manage, that they matter. That's the one thing Renee, for all her calculation, could never have accounted for. Not because she didn't understand it, she understood it well enough to use it against us, but because she understood it as a weakness. The way we loved each other, the way we showed up for each other without being asked, the way a 15-year-old girl would spend 6 weeks carrying a terrifying secret because she could not let her father die. Renee saw that as the soft place, the exploitable center. She was wrong. That's the only place where her math failed. Love is not the soft place. It's the load-bearing wall. Take it out and everything collapses. Build on it, and you get something that survives the things that are supposed to bring it down. Nathan is doing well now. Really well. He started running in the mornings, something he used to do in his 30s, before life crowded it out. He looks like himself again. The color is back. The tremor is gone. He laughs at things in the specific way he's always laughed. This surprise-sounding bark, like he's perpetually, slightly caught off guard by what's funny. I miss that sound more than I knew. Sadie is 16 as of last month. We had dinner the night of her birthday, the 3 of us, at a restaurant downtown she'd been wanting to try. She ordered the most complicated thing on the menu and ate every bite, and then asked the waiter detailed questions about how the sauce was made. She wants to do an internship this summer with the state environmental agency. She has a plan. She has always had a plan. I kept waiting for her to seem afraid, after everything. To be watchful in the damaged way, the way that doesn't leave. But she's not. She's watchful the way a good person is watchful, with their attention turned outward, looking for things that need fixing rather than for threats around every corner. There's a difference. I notice it in her. She learned something from all of this, but what she learned was not fear. Neither did I. What I learned is that ordinary life is not ordinary at all. The Sunday dinners, the Thursday afternoons, the 12-minute drives, the phone calls for no reason, the recipes passed between neighbors, the homework done at a kitchen table. These are the things, not incidental things, the actual things. The things that, when you're in a hospital hallway watching your granddaughter hold her father's hand, you understand were always the point. Pay attention to the people you love, not because they might need saving, though sometimes they do, and sometimes it is your responsibility to save them. Pay attention because they're here, and time is real, and the luck of being still together at the end of a day that could have gone differently is not a small luck. It is everything. I'm still building things in the woodshop, still drinking coffee before sunrise, still watching the light move across the Tennessee hills in the morning, the same hills I've been watching for 30 years from this same window. Nathan is safe. Sadie is whole. And we are here. That's enough. That has always been enough.